I first came into contact with Thomas Merton in 1958. I was 15 years old, a freshman at Archbishop Owen High School in Akron, Ohio. I was standing in the school library, and I pulled off the shelf Thomas Merton's book, The Sign of Jonas, which is a journal that he kept in the monastery. I opened the book to the first page and read, "For myself, I have only one desire, and that is the desire for solitude, to disappear into God, to be submerged in His peace, to be lost in the secret of His face." His words awakened within me spiritual stirrings, which at 15 I was just beginning to discover. That contact began a long journey with Thomas Merton, which has continued to this day. In these sessions, I will be sharing with you what I have come to experience and to understand about his teachings. In Thomas Merton's autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain, Merton tells the story of how he, at 26 years old, left a promising career in literature and academia to commit his life to seeking God as a monk in the cloistered Trappist monastery of the Abbey of Gethsemani in Kentucky. In entering the monastery, Merton went on to write many books on the spiritual life and came over the years to be one of the most widely read, widely respected spiritual thinkers of our time. For me personally, Thomas Merton's influence continued from the 9th grade throughout my 4 years of high school, influencing me to the point that when I graduated from high school in 1961, I left my home in Akron, Ohio, and entered the Abbey of Gethsemani. For 2.5 years, Thomas Merton, in his capacity as Master of Novices, was my spiritual director. This meant that I attended the regular conferences which he gave to the novices at the monastery, and it also meant that I met with him one-on-one about every other week or so. I left Gethsemani in January of 1967, and not quite a year after I left, Thomas Merton died at 53 years of age of electrocution from a short in a fan in a hotel room in Bangkok, Thailand, where he had been given permission by his abbot to go to participate in an international conference on monastic life. It was actually about the time of Merton's death that I began to feel within myself the need to be faithful to the contemplative way of life to which I'd been introduced in the monastery, but in the midst of a much noisier, much more hectic world. Just as Merton had guided me and nurtured me in my years before entering the monastery, and during my time in the monastery, he guided and nurtured me now as I turned to his writings, seeking out insights into how it would be possible for me to live a contemplative way of life. As part of this process, I wrote a book titled Merton's Palace of Nowhere. In that book, I explored Thomas Merton's understanding of the true self, one with God. The title, Merton's Palace of Nowhere, comes from the writings of the Taoist sage Chuang-Tzu, who writes, "Come with me to the palace of nowhere, where all the many things are one." Merton spoke of his affinity with Chuang-Tzu. He wrote a book titled The Way of Chuang-Tzu, which is an anthology of Chuang-Tzu's sayings. And seeing that poetic phrase, the palace of nowhere, I saw it as a metaphor for the true self. When that book came out, I began to receive requests to give retreats on Thomas Merton. However, what became apparent to me is that those attending these retreats were more keenly interested in what might be called the path to the palace of nowhere, how they might possibly come to the realization of their own true self, one with God. In response, I put together a set of conferences on Thomas Merton's teachings of the spiritual life. It is these conferences that I will be sharing with you here in our sessions together. I would like to make clear before I begin that these sessions are not about Thomas Merton's life. If you are unfamiliar with his life and would care to know more about him, I would recommend reading his autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain, and also his other autobiographical writings. I also wish to make clear that I am not attempting to provide any kind of formal or academic study of Merton's thought. For a study of Merton's thought, I would recommend you go directly to Merton's own writings. Specifically, the books to be numbered among his core spiritual writings. These would include New Seeds of Contemplation, Thoughts in Solitude, No Man is an Island, Disputed Questions, The New Man. His core spiritual writings also include his writings on social justice, such as his book Seeds of Destruction, and his 3 books on Buddhist-Christian dialogue, Mystics and Zen Masters, Zen and the Birds of Appetite, and his posthumously published The Asian Journal of Thomas Merton. Rather than devoting ourselves here to Merton's life or any formal, structured study of his teachings, our time here will be devoted to exploring together the seminal themes of self-transformation his writings invite us to explore. More specifically still, I will be sharing with you what I have experienced and have come to understand about these seminal themes found in his writings. The emphasis here will be on the nature of contemplative experience. That is, exploring contemplative experience not as an abstract theory, but rather as it actually grants itself to us in our day-by-day living. This, in fact, to me, is one of the most important aspects of Merton's teachings. It is this down-to-earth, real-life quality to everything that he said, which flowed directly from the honesty of the way that he lived.